Welcome to the Adam Savage Project. I'm Adam.
And I'm Norm.
That's a slightly different intro. I have never done the intro, and our words are a little different. Why are our words different, Norm?
Well, we're back, first of all. For those of you who kept us in your podcast subscription feeds, thank you. Thank you
Yes.
for indulging us in our summer break.
Indeed.
We've made good use of it. Absolutely. We'll be talking a little about that. But we are resuming the podcast. Now that it's September, we have a lot of stuff to talk about. And one of the reasons we want to do it is, well, we wanted to give the podcast a name.
We wanted to give it a name. We wanted it to no longer be Still Untitled. And so it is no longer Still Untitled. It is now officially the Adam Savage Project.
It turns out the name was in there the whole time.
The name was there the whole time. And the question is, what is the Adam Savage Project?
And I think that's the more important thing. Like, the reason we want to come back is I think you had been thinking about podcasts, and we've been doing this for 8 years.
Good
right? Which
God,
is
almost 400 shows at this point, right?
Yeah. And I think, we fell into a groove of the things we would talk about, our check-ins, and with our last episode, we asked you out there what you liked about the conversations we had. And, we kind of took a look back at, what we talked about in the early days. And a lot of people talked, they found that the kind of deep dives into single topics of making and creativity, like they really enjoyed those, as well as a mix of the check-ins with us. And so we're going to lean heavily into that. And you found some inspiration.
Well, I did. I thought about, what is the Adam Savage Project? I asked that question of myself directly, and I realized, if I have a project in my life, it is to encourage everyone to find that inspiration in their daily life that feeds them and gives them a little extra energy. Was the subject of my book, Every Tool's a Hammer, and it's the subject a lot of what I talk about on Tested, that I want to be a permission slip for, go build with Legos, go make model kits, go make props. All of my hobbies are useless. They're not making anybody healthier. They're not fixing big problems with the world, but they are also provide that meditative space that allows us to rejuvenate ourselves. That's why I so value creativity in my life and encourage other people to go find those things that inspire them to make something from nothing. And that's really what that's the broadest definition of what my lifetime project is. And I think it is a great subject for this show.
And it's a feedback loop. I was going to say it's one of those things where we hear you out there, that people who consider themselves makers or just want to hang out, or of all degrees, build Lego, work in their workshop, they find sometimes the things that we talk about inspiring, and the things they share with us, the things that you out there share with us on social media, it fuels us too. Right?
Dude,
and it's this
so
amazing feedback loop of inspiration. And it's something that when we travel in the country and even the world, meet people, and in the before times, meet people in person. We find that that's like this touchstone that we always go back to in our conversations with them.
Well, and I realized, looking at the comments from you guys out there about what you liked about the podcast, is that everything you liked about the podcast vend over nicely with the idea of everyday inspiration. Yeah. When we talk about spoiler casts, when we talk about movies or TV shows or comic books that we're reading, we're talking about them because they hit us somewhere interesting and we want to talk about that. And that to me is like, once I understood that my life's mission worked well with the title that was already embedded there, it seemed just like a very natural extension of what we've been doing and giving it a little more structure.
And, we buried the lead a little bit because you gave the intro. So for those of you just listening to the audio, you may not notice, Will is not here. And that's because Will, who has found great success with his TechPod podcast, is going to focus on that. And we're kind of opening the door to filling our third chair with a regular rotation of guests and members of the Tested team to talk about these projects and things that inspire them. But we've been talking. I mean, I've been podcasting with Will for well over 10 years now, much longer than that before we even started Tested, and we're still talking on a regular basis. But it's kind of amazing that we've been doing this for 8 years.
8 years, it's astounding. And Will moves on to different pastures, and we're still, it's all on. It occurred to all of us at the same time, kind of to shift this and change this a little bit.
And so we will be having guests on, and we know that we don't do the talking room as a regular show on Tested, and it's probably very difficult to do it and think about doing that. Welcoming someone into your library to have that kind of conversation. So, and same thing, with what we did with the book club. So, and we know these are things that also work well. These conversations work well as audio. So it was another opportunity to kind of merge all of that. This isn't going to be the talking room in that format. We may still in the future, do those type of interviews. But these are going to be just conversations with folks. And because we're all remote, it makes a lot of sense, with a lot of friends around the world that we want to check in on and what they've been doing and with their time during this lockdown over the past 6 months. And so we'll be bringing those friends in and on a regular basis, almost every week.
On a regular basis, and because hearing other voices is one of the ways in which we help create real culture and make sure that we're hearing from all aspects of our culture.
Absolutely. You mentioned spoiler cast, and we know that's one of the things that people out there love listening to. So that's not going away either.
And we love doing. And we love,
Yes. So it's going to be hopefully on somewhat of a regular schedule, maybe once a month or so. We're going to have a third chair, someone from the team, Joey probably to come in with his perspective. We're all, consuming our corners of media, and there are a lot of things I know you've been watching, Adam, things that I've been watching that I really want to talk about, and if things that are old, things that are new, and so those will continue also.
It is an exciting time. It's this summer. Taking the break from the podcast this summer was really great for me. It allowed me a lot of time to listen to other podcasts and think about the landscape that this would fit within. I really appreciate that for these past 8 years, we created a very unstructured space, and that served a specific purpose that felt right at the time. And spending time thinking about it over the summer, adding some structure now feels better, feels like the right shift to make.
And we don't have a guest this week because
we don't. It's just the two of us.
It's just the two of us, and but I did want to use this as an opportunity because to get this framework, rolling of inspiration, and for those of you who may be new listeners or relatively new listeners, let's just dive into the things that inspire you, Adam, and some of the projects you've been working on during this break.
Well, it's hard to separate the summer from the COVID lockdown, but I will make my best attempt. If there's anything that's typified the last few months for me, it has been that there's been a lot more attack on shop infrastructure than I expected. At the same time, I have been, because the crew went away and I'm filming everything on the phone, I'm building a lot. I'm building just way more than I have ever built in the shop before. I'm really putting in 40 hours a week here in the cave, and never in my life have I put 40 hours a week into my personal projects. Funnily enough, I still feel like I'm always running out of time. I still suffer from this scarcity model of time in the shop that there's like, no, I'm not going to get it done. I'm not going to get it done. I'm not going to get it. So this summer, I have broken the back of the shop's organizational structure, finally. And in the past few weeks, we have been able to clear out about half of my loft storage, which nobody on Tested's ever seen before, what goes on up there. I have a new idea about what I'm storing in the cave versus what I put into deep storage. And that's also sort of opened my mind up to bigger and deeper projects. And perhaps the biggest thing that happened this summer is after Grant Imahara died in early July, that really kicked my ass. And I didn't feel like building anything for a while. And then when I did start to look around my shop and realize it's time to get to work again, I wanted to. I wanted a specific experience out of the mourning of Grant and thinking about the loss of him in my life and in the world. And I realized that one of the ways in which Grant and I regularly bonded was over the deep dive projects that we worked on together. We built R2D2s together. We started in 1999 or 2000 with a small group, a cadre of ILMers that were building our own R2D2s totally from scratch. No molds from the originals or anything, just taking measurements and building our own. And Grant completed his a few months ago. I completed mine a few years ago. And so I decided to jump into a deep dive project and replicate. Well, I guess I'll talk about this now.
Ooh, do you want to give it away?
We can I decided to do a one-day build that is going to end up taking me well over 150 hours to complete by the time I'm done with it. Yeah. I'm about 90 hours in, and it's going to be a multi-part build because it is a super complicated build, and it is way out at the extent of my machining ability.
I think that's a real big important theme. It feels like to say culmination would be wrong because that would mean that it's the end of something, but it's obviously just another milestone in your journey. Mm-hmm. But for people to follow the thread of your infrastructure builds and your building of skills, people really love your constructing the nut and bolt video.
Right.
And one of the recurring themes of you using the lathe, upgrading the lathe, and building all these organizational tools for your lathe, right, and your drill press was because you're leveling up your machining. And that feels like, whether it's conscious to you or not, whether you made that decision to say, I'm going to go step up machining, it happened. And the prop that you're working on really felt like you could take that on because you had the motivation and the confidence to do that.
Well, and that started with the base of the little mini chop saw. That was the project on which I was like doing some more miniature machining at a precision level where everything was plus or minus like about 1 thou, where normally my ratio is more like 5 to 20 thou in terms of the fit and fitment. But that's because most of my machining is aesthetic machining. So far, I have rarely built things in which all of the parameters had to mechanically fit together as well as work in some aesthetic way. Yeah. And then the nut and bolt were me actually taking on something and pushing myself farther. And that was it's in the video. That was an ass kicker. That was those 2 days aren't 2 days that I remember fondly at all. I remember it being a lot of ass kicking and a lot of like feeling pretty behind the eight ball. But at the end of that, Norm, I looked up and I was like, oh, there's more that I can do with these skills. And it's almost like you keep this list in your head of things that you want to do. I do.
Yep.
And yep. Yeah. And sometimes I think about them and I'm like, I'm not ready to do that one yet. I'm not ready to. I once saw a famous violinist play a piece at a conference that was specifically not recorded because it's a super complicated piece of music. And it's one he'd been playing his whole life. But because he hadn't fully realized for himself what his exact point of view was on that piece, he wasn't ready to officially record it. So he played for us something that for him was at like 95%. And that was really, really beautiful to feel like that. And that's the same thing happens with not just makers, but anybody who is, not just makers. I mean, it happens to every maker, whether you're coding, you're writing, or playing music. There are those plateaus where you can see that you're not there yet, but you might not. I personally hadn't thought about, well, what will it take me to get there? And then as I started to do things like the nut and bolt and starting to go home at night wondering why the mistakes happen, and then kind of unpacking the build mentally and realizing, I needed to slow down my material because I'm grabbing more each time. Those little tiny details that you start to learn become pieces of institutional knowledge. I liken that like for a long time with carpentry, you're measuring things to the mark on the tape measure. And then there's a point at which you start marking and remembering in your head which side of the mark you're marking on. Like you get to that level of specificity. Well, with the machine tools, it's like that times 10, right? You're going to one order of magnitude finer granularity with those kind of measurements.
And one of the I guess you can say benefits of this lockdown is that it's been a discrete period of time where, both you and I have been out of school for so long, but people in school taking classes, and even adults taking classes, you have a semester, you learn a skill, and you can reflect and say, at the beginning of the semester, I knew this much. At the end, I accomplished this much, and I knew this much. And that's structured learning. And so much of life is not structured growth or learning. You just kind of flow through it. Exactly. But having this kind of the lockdown as a framework to say, back in March, we all started working on these things, and now we're in September, and you can really reflect and say, wow, in these past 6 months, I grew by this much because I kept on making and I kept on building.
Well, I wanted to mention this particularly because you've had a couple of builds we put up recently that you did at home that are way more ambitious than previous builds. And I wanted to talk about what kind of stuff happened to you internally while doing the Book Nook, the Death Star hallways, and the lightsabers for the 1/6 scale figures. The photography on those is so beautiful. And I also have the question about why did Obi-Wan get a green saber and Luke get a blue one? But besides that,
that's technically Qui-Gon's lightsaber. is better suited for that modification than Obi-Wan's hilt. But I it went through the same journey of having that list of things and of projects that I either see on Reddit or see on YouTube or see on forums, other hobbyists who have taken on these things and things that I want to do because I want the experience of doing them. And I found there were two things that got me to complete those. One was momentum. And it wasn't something I had experienced before, where you look at a project, and I'm sure you've had this experience, thousands of times. You come up with an idea, and when it comes to you fully formed, you want to get the momentum going. There's an impulse, and whether that's just acquiring the tools and materials, right? That's like I could spend a day, an afternoon just on my phone, on a computer, just like shopping online for the parts I know that I'll need, because nothing breaks momentum harder than being halfway through and then you're missing a thing,
and you have to wait a few days,
and you got to wait, and that it sucks, right? So it's like acquiring the resourcing needed, and then reading it and really watching all the videos and reading all the forums about other people who've done similar things to to have some idea in your head. Like that momentum I felt was really, really powerful.
Well, so I mean, so with the Book Nook, what was the shift that made you decide, one, I'm going to build this, and then two, I'm going to front load all the purchasing so I have as smooth a process as possible? How did those two realizations occur?
I think front loading the purchasing compelled me to then do it. I couldn't have no excuse not to do it.
So you decided. So there was a point at which you were like, "Screw it! I'm doing the book. I'm doing this." Yeah.
Yep.
I have a thing I want to see made real, which is the hallway with the mirror, etc.
Yep. And I could visualize it fully in my head. It didn't turn out exactly how it was visualized, but I had some form. I knew that even if I didn't learn anything, even my current skill set, it would be at least complete in one form, and I had the materials, and I could start.
So there was this point at which you saw the two hallways and the way they stacked. You kind of understood that structure, and then you had this club with which to beat the project into submission with.
Yeah, and a lot of that was vector design in Adobe Illustrator, which I'd been slowly improving over the summer, and also understanding which part of a process I was going to love. Right, like I knew that for this project it would be a lot of Adobe Illustrator work. And over doing many of these small projects, that's something I know I'm going to love.
Oh,
and
cool.
So no part of this was going to feel, I mean, there are parts going to feel like a drag, and there are going to be disappointments and things that fail. But knowing that there's one part that I can really invest time in and maybe find a flow state in, right? That I found was also important.
How was it? what are the working conditions at your house? Do you have a little workbench in the garage? I don't think I've ever
I'm
seen a picture, Norm.
I'm literally working on this IKEA round table that I'm podcasting on.
The
That's
white
my
one with
laptop.
the
Yep,
I love
literally
that
the
table.
table that I cleared off, and I earlier I made a little a display stand for an Alvin cutting mat,
Yeah.
and that framework, that limitation is okay. My project's going to be small. They're going to be assembled here. They're not going to be big woodworking projects. And
did you, as you cut the pieces, did you have an organizational structure for being able to put it away each night?
Cubbies. So I have like IKEA cubbies. Yeah.
Okay.
And just the big mess, and knowing that I want that mess to go away. So you got to finish the project for the mess to go away.
Yeah. How long did the Book Nook take overall once you started it?
That was about 2.5 weeks. Yeah, 2.5 weeks, and it's a month of getting the momentum to start.
Yep.
And then once the momentum starts, it's just nights and weekends, 2.5 weeks, and then also the photos, like knowing that for every project I'm going to want to do, my payoff is always going to be some photos with that. That is huge in terms of motivation.
Right. Yeah. Oh, of course it is. Of course it is. Right. Because you can smell how much that's going to give you in the camera lens, and how much control, and how much. Oh, that's really awesome.
Yeah. So where you build cosplay, and the fulfillment of a cosplay is to wear it, to have it in public, to go to a show with it. The fulfillment of everything I want to do is to take a nice picture of it.
Right. Well, that's the everybody completes a project looking for a certain kind of experience.
Yeah.
Right there. I mean, there's a and actually I want to dial into this for a second, because when I say a certain kind of experience, that can also just be the aesthetic experience of seeing the thing that's beautiful, but it could also be, for me, there's an authenticity to holding a replica of some ancient manuscript that feels completely authentic. That's the sort of experience I'm looking for. I've talked about it extensively. Yours being that setting up the camera and looking through the lens and visit. I mean, in a way, you're visiting a whole nother world through the eyepiece of that camera.
And I know that can hide all the crimes.
Right.
It's always like going to look better, with a photograph, with lighting, with some atmospheric fog, some effect, post process, than it looks in person. And I feel like that is the the fulfilling factor. But the unexpected fulfillment that I found was, so I knew I had momentum, build these things, have them, the objects. The unexpected part was I started sharing some of the files. So I made these dioramas and I put the files on Thingiverse.
Right.
And like, I think some people have clicked on me. I think I can see on Thingiverse a couple hundred people have clicked on them and bookmarked them. But the first time I saw a picture that someone either tweeted me or posted or emailed of the thing they built out of the designs I made, I cried.
Right?
Like, I know it's a common thing, like people share their STLs, but it was like as much pride as having a baby.
I don't. That's intense, but I totally feel you. It's the same, like the tested mailbag. Every time Ryan brings in what comes to the PO box, and so much of the tested mailbag is stuff sent by fans who are inspired by something that we did on Tested, and either it's something that they built because they were inspired, or it's something that they were inspired to share with us because it reminded them of the beginning of their careers, etc. It's across the board, but every one of those, when you realize that someone took the thing you did and then spent some of the precious time in their life to take it to a different place than you did, holy hell, that is, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful sharing of experience.
Right? Like the positivity and energy, I'm sure, like, I hope they felt, and what I felt, it felt like there was no negative to it at all. Like it broke some rule of thermodynamics of like everyone felt better about this afterwards.
Right. It's just a net good for the world.
Yeah.
Do you already have a second Book Nook in your head that you want to do?
Yep.
Nice.
And again, it's the momentum right now is I have parts that are coming in and things, and so a box, a bin, just like you have bins behind on the. Once that bin is full, then I'll get started on it.
And the other project that's doing really well right now, people are really loving it, is the lightsabers for your 6-scale action figures.
Yeah.
And this is one that was really clear to me from the get-go that it's all about photography.
Oh, it's 100%. Yeah.
Just making the characters look right in that photo. And the sculpts on 6-scale figures is so beautiful. I mean, there's a lot of times I'm looking at a picture of a 6-scale figure face, and I'm like, am I looking at actual Gary Oldman or a sculpt of a tiny Gary Oldman head? I can't tell.
It's funny. I have like a wall of them, and yeah, it's the appreciation. There are people I know that work in that business, for Sideshow Collectibles or Hot Toys or Quantum Mechanics, and they're so obsessive about, these, you can call them dolls. People, it's totally fair to call them dolls, but the accuracy of the cut and sew, what it means it's miniature work, right? It's like this for the same type of precision you for model making, for stop motion film. It's that, and to have it at an attainable level where it can be mass produced is kind of a miracle today. And the fact they're posable, interaction, like Danica, she looked at my collection. It's like you have a lot of Iron Men and a lot of Batman, but not a lot of women, right? And she has like some Wonder Woman. I'm like, you know what? Don't judge my gaze totems. And I said, I think it'd be a little like, it'd be a little weird. It's like I don't collect them in the way that some other people collect them, but I completely acknowledge that I'm gazing at these in a certain way.
Yep, and I would submit that while her observation is completely important and useful to you as a partner and as a creative person and as a thinker of your own and examiner of your own experience, there's also this aspect. I years and years ago, an ex-girlfriend of mine who's still a very dear close friend, when we were dating and I was like 18, 19 years old, she was like, your sculpture tends to be quite violent. You like making these weird guns and special effects things, and they feel sort of menacing. Like, why would you do things that are like that? What value are you adding to the world with this imagery? And I remember even then having the clarity and saying, your question carries with it the assumption that I have a choice in the matter. I am responding to myself just in the same way that I'm responding to my culture. I'm looking for those things that grab me, and I'm just moving towards them, and then I'm learning what I can from that experience. And I would submit that when you find something that you've got to collect, that you want to be part of that wall, and you are looking for an experience when you look at that wall, that you aren't guiding who you are. You are unpacking it and learning about who you are.
And so much of it is a reflection of these are all pop culture items, right? And so their design and is a reflection of how they are portrayed in the media, right? The movies and the comic books and the video games. And though in many cases, the way those characters are designed are not exactly things that I think, should be gazed on necessarily. Right.
Yeah.
So I hope that media changes, and there are characters I would absolutely love that I'm not going to feel weird about.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't mean to also use what I said as a thing to wash away the sins of being ignorant to a whole portion of culture that's going on around you by any means. But as we examine ourselves, it's really important to take that permission of like, well, this is the thing that I'm responding to. That's interesting. And I've totally I was having dinner with Peter Becker from Criterion and Guillermo del Toro a few years ago up in Toronto, and we were talking about prop replication, and they were like, have you ever done a prop replica from a kung fu movie? And I'm like, well, the Crouching Tiger. And they had an idea from a specific franchise of a thing that I should build. And normally I don't respond very well to that kind of push. But these guys gave me a suggestion that I think, implement one day, because it really is a compelling build. It's from a franchise that I know well, but hadn't thought of as a place for me to go looking for a prop replica. And yet, in the preliminary research I've done, it is unpacking some new things about my process. So that's, like, all of those examinations from every place you do them from are valuable.
And all of this is to say that the inspiration that you get and that we get for the things we make come from things that we are very well conscious of, or from the most unlikely of places. And this process of fulfilling that inspiration and making things is kind of a self-examination too.
Exactly. And it's the most important self-examination. It's those parts of yourself uh, that are really true and secret that we often don't share with each other because maybe they feel too strange, or maybe you don't want to tell your coworkers you love ballroom dancing, or you're a brony. I mean, all of these things are they make us vulnerable. When we share them, they totally make us vulnerable. And that means vulnerability means you have the opportunity to be hurt. You have the opportunity to be taken down a notch. And uh, I realized while writing Every Tool's a Hammer that, and I wanted the book to be a permission slip for people to accept those parts of themselves and share them openly and exult in them with others of like minds. That is really important for us to do, to support each other in our various gaze totems, as it were.
Yeah. I mean, and we hope people will join us on this journey, because these are the kind of discussions that we want to have with our friends, with the makers that we've met. And so thank you also for subscribing.
Absolutely. It's funny. I was just, I was, before we recorded this, I was talking to a film professional whose career overlaps with some of the franchises that I'm in love with. And we were chatting about costume. And this is not rare, but it is always delightful when it happens. I found in this film professional someone who dove into the specificity of the perfection of the things that they were making for movies with every bit of fervid emotion that I bring to any one of my replicas. And I have met the other kind. I've met, production designers and model makers who don't give a crap about the franchise that they're working on. And they still make beautiful things. But I'm really interested in the folks that are always like, you can't go too deep. You can't dive too far in sort of unpacking what experience you're looking for.
Hey everyone, before we continue on with the show, I want to let you know that the Adam Savage Project this week is made possible with support from American Giant. In this time of disruption, as we navigate through COVID-19, we need to come together and support our communities. Now is a great time to be supporting the men and women making stuff in this country and to be buying clothes that are made here too. Did you know that in 1960, 95% of all clothing was made in the USA? Today, only 3% is. American Giant has built a 100% USA-based supply chain with a relationship to factories, workers, and communities at every step that ends up being better for our people and the planet. American Giant makes clothing that's durable, not disposable, while reclaiming the American tradition of making high-quality clothes that last. The clothes are made to be used more, so you need less. American Giant clothes aren't made to end up in a landfill. We've been big fans of American Giant clothes, from their popular hoodies to their jackets, and now that we're working from home, I'm loving their sweatpants and socks and t-shirts. Super, super comfortable, incredibly durable, and they just feel good and they look great too. You definitely should check them out. They're a local business here, and we're just huge fans. We could not say enough good things about them. You can also get 15% off your first order when you use the promo code ADAMS, that's ADAMS, at American-Giant.com. Again, that's 15% off your order when you use the code ADAMS, ADAMS, at American-Giant.com. And thank them for supporting this podcast. Thank you guys for listening, and back to the show. Speaking of subscriptions,
Yes.
We also are on YouTube. That's where some of you are watching this, or subscribers to our YouTube channel.
Mm-hmm.
We're also making an announcement today that we are launching on YouTube channel memberships. So This is like a new system in YouTube where you can directly support us
Hmm.
by joining as a tested channel member. And really, the long story short is that during the lockdown, Adam, you've been making a ton of videos. We've been
Yeah.
putting out, I think, 8 times as many build videos as we did before the
My
lockdown,
God.
40 of them at this point,
Yeah.
and our workflow has changed. Uh, and we kind of like it. We like it's a lot of work to go through and edit a lot of stuff.
Yep.
This much
You guys
stuff,
are getting stuff from me without knowing how I shot it. And sometimes I'm trying to give call forwards. I'll give you your B-roll later and those sort of things. But yeah.
and while you've been doing a lot of infrastructure stuff, you have bigger and more ambitious builds in the works. And one of the ways for you out there to support us so that we can continue this amount of this pace of build videos is by joining our tested channel memberships.
I,
Um,
one of the things I love about our regular tested audience is in the past we've done some corporate partnerships on Tested where I've done videos that were sponsored by companies like DeWalt or others, and in those there is invariably someone who complains in the comments about the fact that we're selling out or somehow it feels like a commercial. And that is always responded to by people saying, these guys have to keep the lights on somehow. We're enjoying all this content mostly for free, and it requires some infrastructure. And this channel membership is one of the key ways in which we're hoping to add to that infrastructure and also increase our ambition of what we can get done.
Yeah, it's going to allow us to do bigger builds. It's going to also keep up this pace of builds, and also it's a way for you out there to to show your support. Actually, you get badges and access to emojis, and all the details are listed if you click on the channel and click the join button. It'll list out all the perks, but also just direct contact and engagement with the tested team
Yeah.
and you, Adam. Q&As, live streams, things that are a little more off the cuff. Like one of the things that we pride ourselves in at Tested is experimentation. Like
Hmm.
if you watch
Live experimentation. Yeah.
absolutely in the production process, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you watch a one day build from 8 years ago versus a one day build now, there's definitely tonal differences. There's a flow difference, and even the wide range of builds and videos that we've put out over the past 6 months. Right, there are lots of experimentation, and we want to expose that to you. If you're curious about production, if you're curious about production during
Yeah.
a lockdown, if you want to get an update, one of the things that we're really excited about is a chance to look back at past builds,
Yeah.
things that you completed last month, last year, a couple of
Well,
years ago.
I mean,
And yeah,
we've been doing this for 8 years together now. And, we were very fundamentally different human beings the best portion of a decade ago than we are today. And I love the idea of asking fans for suggestions of even ancient videos. Our first one day build was a Blade Runner pistol case. Am I right about
that's
that?
right. That's
Yeah.
right.
One of the things we've talked about is doing commentary on some of these old videos, answering questions that fans might have about the process of something that happened a long time ago. And again, we're all about unpacking experience here.
I don't know if I haven't watched some of those videos in a long time, and I love that this is going to be an opportunity to really sit down and for 45 minutes watch a video and pause and tell you what we were thinking. Like it's going to be a nice walk down memory lane.
Yeah, I agree. And there's always something useful in examining the work of the past. Being the son of an artist, early on, I was inculcated with the ethos of recording your work. So I have pictures going back to I have things that I built when I was 6 years old because my parents saved it. I have pictures of almost every sculpture I ever made from the ages of 17 to 25. And that documentation is really important because it describes an art to me, and I learn a lot from going back and looking over that old stuff. And I think the same will be true of Tested when we start to unpack some of these builds.
There's also a lot of that stuff that never made it to the video, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's a sketch or your compilation of the research materials. And so there's a chance hopefully to show some of that as well. There's going to be live streams. We're going to be doing some builds live. We'll be taking questions from members, and putting out there at least once a month.
Yep.
And we're going to, kind of pull the curtain on the Tested team and what everyone's been doing. And, it's one of the silver linings of honestly of the lockdown is that it's caused us to change the way it's forced us to change the way we work. And then as a result of that, we found a lot of things that we really loved in this workflow, in this new world.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
I really feel like there will be a kind of an interesting, well, presumably at some point we'll be back to filming live in the cave. And I know that what will happen is the videos that we make that way, like we used to make them, will be fundamentally different from the ones we used to make because of all the things that have happened over the past 6 or 8 months.
Yep. Yeah. And for those of you who can't support this way, that's totally cool. Nothing about the experience of the channel is going to change. You're still going to get the same videos, this podcast.
You're not going to get less videos. Yeah. It's going to be the same Tested you've been enjoying. But we also have 2 tiers for engagement too.
Yes.
A lower cost one and a higher cost one. So we're hoping to accommodate as many fans as we can for those perks. And we want those perks to feel real.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that it gives us a real nice idea of just who you guys are too, right? Like to see this many people are willing to back us this way. It motivates us, and that's why we want to make more.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just
so details.
More. Yep. Yeah, details.
Exactly. Details are, if you just go to our page, actually, there should be a join button. Sorry. If you're watching the video right below, or it's just on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/tested. And hopefully you'll be able to join us for this next step in our journey for that. And also for this podcast.
It's very, very exciting time. And it feels right to be birthing a new version of a thing at this time when the rest of reality has a lot of bad news. This is the other thing is that doing our work here at Tested has felt like an incredible silver lining in the comfort and succor it's provided to you guys who watch us so loyally. And I really appreciate that. The feedback we got when I was doing the live streams before the summer was all about that. And, you, as a human being with empathy, I look out at the world and I want to help and I want to be part of the solution. And I do lots of things to do that. But it is also really lovely to know that just building stuff here is also part of that solution for a lot of people watching. That it is that safe space, and we love creating that space. We delight in the celebration of these weird things that we all build here on this channel, and of the ways in which that feeds what you guys are interested in, what you ask for, and what you're building.
Yeah, it's kind of the antidote to doom scrolling.
That is my favorite new word. And seriously,
that's our pitch. Don't doom scroll. Join our community.
Stop doom scrolling and watch Tested. That should be a T-shirt. I think we might need to make that a T-shirt.
Adam, well, I'm really excited to continue and start the podcast again. Again, we have a name now. It's the Adam Savage Project. The feed should be exactly the same, and hopefully we'll see you guys next week. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
And watching.
See you guys next week. Is there anything we want to cover coming up on the site this week, Norm?
We got more builds. We actually have 2 builds that were shot before the lockdown that were finally, it's one of those things we're like, oh, we're going to be in lockdown for just 2 months, for 3 months. It's going to be fine. And then we'll publish those builds. But at some point we're like, we should really get these out. And so you'll be able to see those in these next 2 weeks.
Oh, I'm really excited to see the contrast between those and our lockdown videos.
Same here. All right. We'll see everyone next time.
Bye, guys.
Thanks. Bye.